Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast. This time, taking a moment aside to discuss kind of what might have been and what is. You see, far back in the mists of ancient time, in the times when Doctor Who didn't exist anymore. Let's face it, back in 1989, about 10 weeks before the beginning, well, not even that, a handful of weeks before the beginning of the 90s, the BBC was seen by, let's use the word many, all, including fandom. Doctor Who was over. Dead in the water, not wanted on Journey, that's it, done. We didn't even get an announcement that it was cancelled. It just didn't come back. Which is rubbish. So, you know what it's like. You're a Doctor Who fan now. If you want something that doesn't exist, you make it yourself. For example, at the time, I wanted a question mark umbrella. Such things didn't exist, so I looked into it, bought some extruded, Perspex rod. Actually, my first one was made out of MDF. But you bought some extruded Perspex rod, wrapped it round, sprayed it red, and augmented a very posh umbrella and made your own question mark umbrella. Now these things can be bought. You wanted a Dalek? You made one. You wanted a TATDIS interior? You made one. You can see where this is going. And because some people out there are considerably talented, they wanted their own Doctor Who's. People had been making their own fan fiction for years. The audio visuals, because that's where this story starts, are a bunch of people whose names you will recognise. Basically, they got together, they got the highest quality recording equipment they could, wrote their own stories, and then wrote their own Doctor Who stuff, and performed it, and recorded it. These are the days before CD. These are the days when you could buy CDs. They were like bootleg impersonators. Like the bootleg Beatles when you can't get the Beatles anymore. They were almost universally regarded well. The production values were surprisingly high, and these things went on. Now, the BBC had not at this point given anybody any licenses. Yes, the L word isn't great. But the Doctor Who is not like other creatures. The copyright of all of the monsters, the creatures, and everything else sort of remains the property of the original people who created them. This is a gateway, a back way in. You see, BBV, which is Bill Baggs Video, also known weirdly as Bill and Ben Productions, for reasons which I'm sure one day will become very, very clear. Basically, Bill Baggs created his own production company. This is the sort of thing that I should be doing. I should be more driven. I should be producing Tin Dog Productions. All I can manage to do is knock out a few books here and there and record the odd, short trip. Short story. But this is someone who's driven and can manage to scrape together the funds for their own things. There are documentaries. Yes, Bill Baggs managed to interview people before they died. It's very difficult to do this after they've died, yes. And produce some wonderful things. There's the Air Zone solution, which was released in 1993 as part of the 30th anniversary, the unofficial 30th anniversary. It had every surviving Doctor actor in it, with the exception of mad old Uncle Tom. This is before Paul McGann even came back. Now, storyline. The Air Zone solution is a nice bit of hard-edged sci-fi. It's got some pretty good effects, and it's the sort of thing we ended up buying. You could buy it in HMV. Ah, videos, VHS, we loved you so much. So these productions weren't official, but they did have all of the original casts. You ended up with stories about a Time Lady and K9, which is of course copyright of not the BBC, in eSpace. These are all dancing around the edge of legitimacy. They also managed to get permission to do all sorts, producing what Nick Briggs describes as Who clones, and things that very closely resemble Doctor Who. But the names have been changed to keep the BBC at bay. Things like The Professor and Ace. Yeah, I know. With Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred. These are legitimate CDs that you could buy. This was Big Finish before Big Finish. In a Universal way, you can definitely see it as a Betamax versus, well, VHS. VHS being Big Finish, they win out in the end, they get the legitimate rights to use everything all completely above board and become the dominant species. But Betamax never really went away. It became Betacam and became the industry standard. Betamax was a great system. I had it for a very long time. It is not to be ignored. And BBV is not to be ignored because it's back. It has its own website. And I suggest you check it out because there's a lot of stuff there that, well, let's put it this way. I get emails and tweets from people who don't really like modern Doctor Who. They're not a big fan. It's just not for them. Now, obviously, the real reason for this is that Doctor Who, as an entity, speaks to you at a certain point in your life, either when things are very good or when things are very bad, and becomes a focal point of goodness for those moments. And you spend a lot of your life trying to claw back those moments. So therefore, the older you get, the further away from those points are. Often you become disheartened with Doctor Who because what you want is this golden age, which never really existed, but you want the emotional context. Okay? That's the psychobabble version of fandom. At least one of my theories. But the important bit is that you might not like modern Doctor Who, but you might have liked various other aspects. Now, one of the big aspects of Doctor Who fandom back in the 90s was the novelisations. Things like Faction Paradox, where the Gallifreyans were at war with a major villain. Yeah, it's a time war by any other name. And Faction Paradox were practically the most Cthulhuid of Doctor Who incarnations. They had Grandfather Paradox, who may or may not be the Doctor. They had all sorts of creatures, primarily created by, well, mad old Lance. And they were great stories. Well, audio adaptations and scripts ended up on BBV. They were available as CDs. I'll review those in the next few weeks. But they became massively expensive on eBay. Well, you don't have to download them illegal anymore. You don't have to hunt them down badly on a dangerous Russian site. What you need to find is their own website, because all of these things are now available to buy direct from BBV. And BBV are going to be producing new audios. They're looking for new artists, new writers to produce new stories. Yes, the formats will evolve and change, but that's fine, because if you don't like modern Doctor Who and you want to go back to a time like the 90s when there was a different flavour of Doctor Who, this is a different timeline, a road less travelled. You might want to give it a go. And if you do, there is a 5% discount voucher. I'll put the code in the show notes, but I'll read it out to you now if you want. O3Q4AP5FKXJ1. The 5% discount code will be on other things. So until next time, give other things a chance. Be seeing you. That was the Tin Dog Podcast. Available on Spotify, iTunes, Acast, Stitcher and wherever good podcasts are found. Get early access to content by subscribing to the Tin Dog Podcast YouTube channel. You can support the show at patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on Twitter at tindogpodcast or email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. All of the things discussed are the intellectual property of others. No infringement is intended. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.